go back to the Marrakesh stuff and or Casablanca.
Yeah, so literally got promoted to SVP while I was on a business trip there, and my family came along with me on the trip to Morocco, and so we decided we were going to do the full experience, the camels out in the Sahara Desert, the whole thing. What we didn't realize is you had to drive for 8 hours in a car on a windy road before you got to pick up the camel. So we do that. But the best part of the whole trip, being from the west side of Cincinnati, is we're on these camels in the middle of the Sahara Desert. I pull out my BlackBerry and I've got a signal. So I'm going to call my dad back in Cincinnati. So I call him up. I go, Dad, guess where I'm at? He goes, I don't know, where you at? I go, I'm in the middle of the Sahara Desert on a camel. And my dad never cusses. He goes, are you shitting me? I go, no, seriously. And so just incredible experience. So yeah, traveling Europe is absolutely fabulous. I was very fortunate to spend 3 years in Geneva, Switzerland as the CIO and shared service leader for our Western European business, which was fantastic. The boys were 9 and 11 at the time. So they learned to ski in the Swiss and French Alps, and they traveled with us everywhere.
How awesome. When we first went there, we were planning it 6 or 8 months in advance. And I was like, you know what, we're going to jump on the train. We're going to go to Germany for the Christmas villages. I had all these plans, but we got a villa in southern Spain. We were down on the coast, and you just can't do it all. But we went to a lot of the cities, went to Ronda and Cordoba. It was a cool experience, but I wanted to go to Switzerland.
Yeah,
I wanted to jump on the train and go to Switzerland, and it seems, to me, that seems like almost the apex of European adventures to me.
Yeah, and we lived in Geneva, Switzerland, where the UN is. So the greatest part about it is, it's very multinational, very international with all the UN there and all the multinational companies there. It's French-speaking, but everyone can switch to English if they want to. So you make sure you try to learn French, a little bit of French, because they're more than happy to switch if they see you can't speak French very well. If you don't try, they don't switch. So it's great. And, the boys became fluent in French and that whole, and they became, it's interesting, they became citizens of the world living there, which for us was really, really cool. Their class of 20 students was from 20 different countries. So and when they studied religion, they studied all the religions of the world, that type of thing. So, and that stuck with them, which is really, really
How old
cool.
are they now?
So they're my youngest he turns 25 next week, and then the oldest turns 27.
Hey, so we're sitting here talking to, it's supposed to be Andrew, but it's Andy.
Yes.
All right, so Andy Walter, we'll jump back into it, but it's you have a book. I don't know when you originally wrote it, but there's a new iteration, 2022. Is it brand new?
It's brand new.
Okay, so Waiting is Not an Action. I love the title.
Good.
I don't know how long we have today, but we're going to go deep.
All right, good.
And it's Accelerate Your Career Today and Formulate Your Future, plural, career.
Yeah, plural or portfolio career, a lot of people call it, but yeah.
I like this. So I'm excited to talk about this. But we were talking about traveling, and we were touching on your son's 25 and going to be 28?
27.
Okay, 27.
And now actually I've got 4 boys.
Wow.
Because part of the story of the book is my first wife passed from ovarian cancer, got married 3 years ago, so now I got 4 from 23 to 27.
Wow.
Which is great.
That's cool that they're all in this. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. That's probably unique. So who... your biological sons,
yes,
them at 25 and 27, how do they compare to the Andy of 25 and 27 with this world travel, this world experience? Compare them.
Well, let's put it this way, Mark. My first time on a plane was after I worked for Procter & Gamble. So my first time on a plane traveling anywhere was when I was, call it 22, 23. So they saw more in the first 10 years of their life than I saw in my first 40. So it's been absolutely incredible to watch them, and also their willingness to embrace change. Move to California, no problem. Do this, no problem. Travel international, no problem. That probably helped at about the age of 9, my youngest. We landed in Charles de Gaulle, one of the most challenging airports in the world. And I said, okay, Austin, it's your job to get us to the next gate. We're going to follow you. So kind of, putting them into a situation where they can succeed, but they can also realize they can do some pretty challenging things is pretty cool.
It sounds like you were raising problem solvers.
Yeah, well, I have to tell my current wife that, hey, I need to let you know I'm a problem solver. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want me to solve a problem, you need to let me know before we start the conversation. Otherwise, I go into problem-solving mode, and sometimes
causes problems.
They don't want that, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about solving problems and also anticipating what could go wrong, and thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead. Whether you're thinking about your personal life, your professional life, whatever.
So you spent 26 years at Procter & Gamble. That was the basics of everything professionally that you've accomplished ever since.
Yes.
So how much of that problem-solving Andy was developed in those 26 years versus the guy who came out, I'm assuming you went to UC,
Yep.
University of Cincinnati.
Yep.
At 22 and 23, what was the evolution of you over 26 years?
Yeah, no, I think the UC experience and also the co-op experience, both with Monsanto and then Procter & Gamble, was learning how to learn. So I think in the first, call it through high school and university, it was learning how to learn, because nothing I learned in college did I apply necessarily at P&G except learning how to learn. So then the whole executive journey and the formation of that and the leadership formation and all that was literally from P&G on. And that was, what they were looking for is people that could learn new things quickly, could assimilate lots of different information and formulate it into a strategy. And that was the education. I joke with people all the time. It's like, I thought a lot about getting an MBA. And I talked with one of my very early executives that I worked for, and he said, Andy, I've got a hypothesis. He said, now you can go get an MBA, and it'd probably be great to have on your resume, and it might be valuable if you leave P&G and things like that. But my hypothesis is if you got an MBA at P&G instead, you'll go much faster at P&G. Now, don't get me wrong. If you leave P&G, it'd probably be good to have an MBA on your resume. But if you spent half the time you would spend getting an MBA instead investing more in your P&G learning, I think you'll go much faster. And that's exactly what I did, and that's exactly what happened.
So there's lessons to be learned there that you listened to the people that have come before you.
Yeah, and that's one of the key insights that I've captured in my journey, and also talk about in the book, is like I started, when I retired just over 6 years ago, at the ripe old age of 47, I realized that I started working with all these startup CEOs, and they all had advisory boards. And I started looking back at my career, and I said, you know what? I've always had an advisory board. I never called it that. But I always had a group of people that I intrinsically trusted and, leveraged their counsel in every step of my journey when I ran into challenges, all that type of thing. So very early on, I would always have kind of an advisory board of 2 or 3 individuals, some in my line, some outside of my line, some in the business line, some not even in P&G, that would help me on a journey. As a matter of fact, the title of the book came from my very first manager at P&G. And I was in a project review with him, and I said, well, I'm waiting on this supplier to do this, and on this I'm waiting for these R&D guys to do something, and on this I'm waiting, and like right as I said waiting, he stopped the meeting and said, Andy, the meeting's over. And I'm like, what? He said, come back when you're going to do something. Waiting is not an action. And he literally and figuratively kicked me out of his office until I went and did something. And that obviously stuck with me. That was over 30-something years ago that I had that meeting. And by the way, I'm still friends with him today.
That was the moment.
Yeah. Well, that was the moment of, you need to have a sense of urgency. And believe it or not, I think I had forgot that lesson until Debbie got diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Because I reflect on it a lot, because the biggest worry in my life at that point was like where we were going to have Thanksgiving dinner. We were arguing over this, or we're going to have it at this house or that house or whatever. And it just totally changes your perspective. It gives you a new sense of urgency. And it's interesting. I would never wish that on anyone, but it's turned into a huge gift. In addition to the boys and 30 plus years together, the other gift she gave me was you got to live every day to the fullest, and you need to have a sense of urgency with it. That early manager gave me a sense of urgency with a boot in the ass.
Yeah.
This, journey we went on, starting almost 8 years ago, changed everything. And I reflect back on it a lot, and it's like that has made a huge difference in our lives.
Do you think that, does this go in hand with, there's so many of these small moments and happenings in life we make such a big deal about.
Yeah.
It's like, guys, come on. They're really not that significant.
Yeah.
That probably goes hand in hand with live every day to its fullest. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Well, I feel sorry for the people that are just going through the motions, and I see it, and kind of tying it to the concept, there's a lot of people that are just playing not to lose.
Yeah. How do you help with that?
Yeah. So I think it's just expose them to, you don't have to keep doing it the way it's always been done. And, my insight was, many executives, many CEOs, many startup, companies and the like are trapped by the way it's always been done. And they don't even know they have permission to do it any other way. So what I do is a lot of times either through direct coaching or working directly with the leadership of the clients that I'm now serving is just exposing that to them. I'll give you a simple example. I was working with J&J Consumer out of Philadelphia, and we were doing a session, and I said, well, you guys need to get way more externally focused. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, when I led the analytics transformation at Procter & Gamble, we created five innovation briefs that we would share externally with universities, startups, venture capitalists, all that, saying, hey, if you can solve one of these problems, we're really interested. And they said, oh, this is great. We could put together like 5 of these ourselves. And, over the next 3 to 4 weeks, we could build these 5 innovation briefs. We'd need a few weeks to socialize it within the company. And, within a couple months, we could have these out. And we're just getting ready to take lunch break. And I said, we could do that. Or we could go to lunch, come back, and in the next 90 minutes, we could build all 5 of these right now. You could socialize it over the next week, and I'll tell you how to do that. And the next Friday, we could be getting them out there. And I literally left and went to the airport. I got a call from the leader I was working with. He goes, Andy, every single person has come into my office since you left and are so excited because they didn't realize they were allowed to do that. They didn't realize they were allowed to move fast and make a difference fast because the way it's always been done is slow.
Does that go hand in hand? In the preface of the book, you have a statement from Machiavelli, from The Prince. It seems like that's in line with that idea.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so the foundation of it, you're not going to be able to, probably word by word quote it right now.
Yeah.
Maybe you can.
Yeah, it literally, I wrote that on the top of my career folder within 2 years of starting my career. And the basic concept is, if you are going to bring disruption or breakthrough innovation, you're going to have lukewarm supporters from many, but most people are going to be like, I want to keep the status quo. So, this whole idea of being an innovator or being a disruptor, being an entrepreneur is tough because everyone who's been successful under the current model doesn't want you to succeed. And so I can not only go through my career and tell you what type of assignments and what level I was at. More important, I can tell you every breakthrough innovation I did for Procter & Gamble, that's still there today. So what I talk about with a lot of my entrepreneurs, a lot of my startup companies is how do you create that type of innovation?
It's a mindset, right?
Absolutely.
How was that developed within P&G? Because it sounds like those 26 years were extremely impactful. And it seemed like it was such fast. It was almost like the fastest moving river we've ever seen.
Yeah.
And the currents were changing all the time.
Yeah.
How was that mindset programmed? Like how was that accomplished in that environment that you take and consult with now?
Well, I think it's interesting. Part of it was that what we just talked before of I got my MBA at P&G.
Yep.
And what I mean by that is instead of writing a position paper for a class, I did it for P&G. Instead of writing a strategy document for a class, I did it for P&G. Instead of reviewing a book and doing a small thesis, I did it for P&G. No one asked me to do any of those things at P&G. As a matter of fact, one time I was sitting in Augusta, Georgia, and I had wrote this piece and sent it back to my previous management, and one of the senior leaders said, "Who is this guy? You know, he doesn't even work in this area anymore, and he's still reviewing Harvard Business Review articles that are relevant to our journey." Now, interesting, she became one of my most important mentors and advocates. When I came back from Augusta, I thought I was going into this assignment. All of a sudden, I get a call from her and said, "No, you're not going there anymore. You're coming back and working for me in this area." You know, so those type of things. But at P&G, I went to ABM Brand Manager College. I started first working with R&D, so I learned everything I could about innovation and knowledge management and how P&G did that at R&D. Then I went to a manufacturing assignment, and I said, "Holy shit, we actually make something. This is really cool." And how do you run these plants that are making millions and millions of products every day and do it at incredible scale? So it's that MBA I got at P&G, but also going way beyond what anyone ever asked me to do at P&G, kind of because I was in this mindset of getting my MBA.
So everyone wonders how you arrive with the title of SVP, information technologies, that whole thing. But aren't there so many people that are sitting back wondering, because every person that comes out of that meeting with your manager when you were young, when he's like, "Hey, this meeting's over," right? Because you're sitting here waiting on other people until you take action. That's the message.
Right.
Until you take action and come back with some solutions, this is over. For everyone who doesn't have that natural reaction after that meeting, it's a different world now.
Yeah.
Right? Those people wonder, how do I get to where Andy, he achieved at the top in 26 years? You were sharing some of these very important characteristics and thought processes and mindset. It's like, guys, that's how.
Yeah. No, I capture a lot of those in the book. But I, with my 4 boys today, I tell them, and you kind of started alluding to this, one of my differentiators, was I was willing to work harder than anybody else. Mm. And, I put myself through college frying chicken at a restaurant on the west side of Cincinnati, Ron's Roost. I paid
chicken right on race.
Paid my own way going through the University of Cincinnati. My parents were very loving, room and board. I lived at home because that's what I needed to do it. I was convinced very early on no one was ever going to work harder than me. And I don't mean just like going through the motion. I mean working smarter.
It's being in Augusta.
Yeah.
It's taking the Harvard review, right? Writing a documentation about probably some process, some improved process,
right,
and sending it to somebody who didn't directly impact you.
Yeah. And when my management said, "Andy, you need to go get a very different assignment outside of Cincinnati," 80% of people will say, "Well, I don't really want to move. I don't want to move my family or whatever." My wife and I had made the decision together as a team. We were going to do that. And it came down to Green Bay or Augusta. And she goes, "At least take me somewhere warmer."
Augusta it was.
Wasn't bad. For
golf and seeing the Masters.
But I went there, as a 26-year-old youngster who had never lived anywhere but Cincinnati. Debbie was 6 months pregnant with our first child when we moved. So both our boys were actually born in Augusta, Georgia. And it was scary, but that made a difference. What I tell people is whenever you try something incredibly difficult, it expands your capability, and it'll never seem difficult again.
Yep.
I didn't have to study. I thought high school maybe was kind of hard, but I never had to study. And then I went to college and go, "Oh my God, high school was easy." Every assignment, the same thing. When we came back from Augusta in '99, we knew, and we agreed as a team, we would go anywhere in the world as long as it was safe for the family, education of the children, and the biggest business opportunity you got. So literally when P&G said, "Hey, we think we got a great assignment for you in Geneva, Switzerland," I said, "Yes, when do you need me there?" They said, "Well, don't you need to talk it with Debbie?" I said, "No, we've already talked it." "Well, don't you want to go check it out?" I go, "No, I trust you. If you guys tell me this meets those criteria, when do you want me there?"
How did you, going back to building your own board?
Yeah.
Right. Your board of influencers, your mentors. How did you build that? Was it intentional? Was it unintentional initially?
The concept and many things, and I even start the book by saying, I wish I could tell you I was brilliant enough to come up with this model, but I just did whatever I needed to do at the time to support Debbie. In many cases, I backed into many of these things. And that's what I try to clarify in the book of like, these are things you got to do. So I always kind of had this model, whatever assignment I went into, I was going to read everything my business partners were reading. So when I was in R&D doing IT work, technology work, I read everything R&D people read. When I went into manufacturing, I read everything the manufacturing people would read. And what I mean by that is like the trade magazines, everything, because I was always going with a different lens. So then my advisory board was always my immediate manager and one-up manager. And most people don't even have a relationship with their one-up manager anymore. I would find someone who was at the next level I wanted to be, who wasn't in my line, who I could ask questions of like, what does it look like to be at that level? What does success look like? And I would always have someone in the business, who knew nothing about the technology, but knew a lot about the business. And some of those people are still mentors today.
So what I heard when you would go into, for example, R&D, even in the IT space, that's you getting to know your product.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Well, and you when you look at that, you look at everything they do with a different lens than they do. Because I looked at everything they did with a lens on technology. So I'll give you a great example from the R&D days. My managers were working on my next assignment. This was, you're going to go to a plant somewhere in the world, blah, blah, blah. And my boss comes to me and said, hey, there's these two guys over in R&D making all this crazy noise. Andy, your job is to go keep them quiet. We're working on your next assignment. I said, okay, great. So I go meet with these two guys, and they are working on this incredibly wacky idea with this new technology. And this is 1995.
Okay. You're about to tell us something that we know now.
This crazy new technology called the World Wide Web. And how they thought the World Wide Web was going to transform how P&G did R&D and everything like that. So I come back to my boss and I go, hey, I hate to tell you, but I think I failed. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, well, they're onto something I think really big, because they knew R&D, I knew technology. So I had done all this research and everything like that. And I said, if you're okay, I need to spend a couple of days doing some research on innovation and knowledge management. He goes, well, what does that mean? There's no Google in 1995, so that means go to the Cincinnati Library and pull out every single book ever written on innovation and knowledge management. I spent 2 days down there doing research on nothing but innovation knowledge management. I created the first prototype of what is now still at P&G called InnovationNet that would connect all 6,000 researchers around the world. It was built on a simple premise. They asked me to go install, because I was working with R&D, they said, Andy, the senior vice president of R&D is a guy named Gordon Brunner, one of the most brilliant innovators in P&G's history. We need you to go to his house in Indian Hill and install a computer in his home, because this is right when home computers were coming. And I said, oh, okay, sure. And, I'm from the West Side, so first house in Indian
Hill, let's go.
It's pretty cool, So it's like I walk into the first family room, what I call the family room. Then we walk into another family room. Then we walk into his kitchen that was probably the size of my house. And he goes, Andy, you know how we did innovation at P&G? He goes, we all went to lunch together. And so we would innovate across categories because we were eating lunch together. And in the way that P&G weaves fibers for Pringles, or did, is the same way they were weaving paper fibers. And that cross-fertilization was critical. He goes, Andy, now we're all around the world. I need you to help us operate as if we're still in one building. So this technology became that breakthrough. Within a few months, I'm presenting it to John Pepper, the CEO of P&G. Funny, I'm still connected with John, and he still remembers that meeting, because he remembers coming down the hallway to the big boardroom at P&G, and he goes, well, they got some guy I don't know who's going to tell me about a technology I certainly don't know anything about, but I assume he's the expert. So we're in this giant boardroom, all the vice presidents, senior vice presidents of R&D, all my management, everything. I'm sitting all the way down at the end with my gateway tower, because there were no laptops at that time, presenting.
Is this 97?
The end of 95.
Okay.
And John comes in, shakes a bunch of hands, and instead of sitting at the over there, he sits right next to me, and it's like I'm the only person in the room. And that whole presentation was one sheet of paper and a demo of the prototype I had created. The one sheet of paper was the day in the life of an R&D person if we had this capability. And the rest is history. They spent, $20, $30 million, built this out as a capability across R&D, and it's still there today. But this whole, no one asked me to go to the university library or Cincinnati library and learn everything about innovation and knowledge management. No one asked me to kind of go to that level, and that led to a very junior person, a couple years with the company, presenting to the CEO of the company.
So what's the moral of the story?
The moral of the story is go further than they expect you to go. Learn the business as well as anyone running the business. In every part of my career, it's like, I would tell the leader I was working with, I don't want you to treat me like your IT guy. I want you to treat me like one of the leaders in the business. And you should have the same expectations. And if I mess up, the same consequences. If I do well, the same consequences.
Yeah.
So it's kind of demanding that.
Did you operate, how old were you in 95 then?
So I would have been just graduated. I graduated from University of Cincinnati in December of 92 and started.
Okay, so you're 25, 26.
January 93. Yeah.
Okay, so you're 25 or 26. How can you reproduce? So the things that you've talked about here, I don't have the P&G experience.
Yeah.
Have some sales experience, operating some companies and things. But the stuff you're talking about a mindset, a sense of urgency, about taking action, about moving forward, not waiting for other people. Everything that I've learned as you speak to these, I'm like, yep.
Yeah.
Yep, of course. Yep. Of course he ended up with that title. Of course he was that impactful. Of course somebody saw the skills in you that put you in that room with a CEO, with the advisors, and then of course you delivered the presentation. Of course you prepared enough. How do we transfer that?
I think it's you keep alluding to a mindset.
Yeah.
So people go, well, Andy, you're comfortable presenting in front of thousands of people. I said, yeah, but the first meeting I was in, I was afraid to raise my hand. I literally would write down the question to make sure I didn't forget the question. And when I put my hand up, I knew my heart was racing, but I still forced myself to do it. So I think it's putting yourself in a position to do those things. So what I coach my 4 boys on, and I talk about in the book, is don't just do your role. Look at where can you help organizationally. So I was the first person to raise a hand anytime we did a leadership or anytime we were doing an organization event or meeting or anything like that. Because guess what? It was going to make me uncomfortable, put me on stage in front of the entire organization, and I'll either succeed or fail publicly.
Did it ever get you into trouble?
A couple times, before I went through official communication training, it did get me in trouble. One time I was at a conference and I was speaking because I was running all the digital marketing for fabric and home care in North America at the time, our biggest business at the time. And we created this little concept called Home Made Simple. Multi-brand home care became one of the largest online properties in Procter & Gamble. And my internal, motto or drive is we're going to beat Martha Stewart. We're going to be bigger than Martha Stewart. Because at the time, Martha Stewart was the biggest brand online.
Yeah.
So I'm in this conference in Little Cincinnati, not realizing there would be any press in the conference or anything like that. So I start getting these questions, and I said, well, our goal is simple. We want to beat Martha Stewart. And they said, well, Andy, do the brand managers and all get them? I go, nah, we just kind of ignore them a lot because, they don't get it yet. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, shit. And so if you Google Andy Walter advertising age beat Martha Stewart, you'll see this whole thing.
Really?
After that, I quickly got communications training by
did somebody pull you aside?
They said nothing, no harm, but let's get you trained. You do this very well, you communicate very well, but let's get you properly trained. And so I always joke now whenever I'm speaking, it's like, I'm a company of one. I have no HR department, no legal department,
no PR.
I can say whatever I want now. It's great. I can sit next to the Unilever people and be allowed to sit next to them, which I couldn't. So it's those things, and it's like never stop investing in yourself is the other thing. Well, most people think like their investment in their expertise stopped when they graduated from the university. My opinion is that's when it starts. So no one said, Andy, you should go to ABM college. No one said, Andy, you should be reading business books nonstop. No one said, Andy, you should, put yourself up on stage as much as possible and learn how to speak and practice and practice and practice. I just did those things, and anyone can do those things.
That's the message, isn't it?
Yeah, and now all the training's online.
It
so
is.
You can access so much more.
Did you back in the 90s? Did you follow or listen to anybody like a Jim Rohn or anything? Did you read the books? Did you work more on yourself than on your job?
I will tell you the one mistake that I thankfully self-corrected with my wife's help around 2004 is I was too much focused on my professional career early in my career. And I never read from 1993 to 2003, I read nothing but business books. I never read anything for pleasure. And I was focused on my career. Now I did that in a way.
It served you well.
It served well, and I would share that with others and everything like that. So I was a studier of every good business book that came out in those eras. So the Jack Welch's, the Execution by Ram Charan, all these ones, and not, you don't try to just replicate the whole thing. You try to pick one or two things that you can bring into your leadership style, your leadership approach. Now, what happened in 2003, 2004 is my boys were getting to the age to start playing sports. And my wife says, Andy, I think you really should coach the boys. And I go, I don't have time to do that. I don't know who these parents are that can spend 20 hours a week coaching. I said, I got this career and I can't do that. And thankfully, I was in a training at P&G on kind of life management priorities. And I just went, transparently, I went because my organization was going and I wanted to be supportive. But I thought it was bullshit.
Yep.
And the exercise, and I capture it in the book, was basically say, what are the three most important things professionally? What are the three most important things personally? What are the three most important things spiritually, financially, stuff like that? In the end, you circle the three most important things on the whole page, and they were all family. And I almost started crying in the meeting. And at that moment, I started coaching my boys in sports. Coached them in baseball and basketball, helped a little bit in football. Even in Geneva, Switzerland, I coached baseball for the American Baseball League. And it was the greatest thing. And what happened was startling to me. Once I got better balance between professional, personal, and financial, all three got better.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
You never would have predicted that.
Never.
You would have thought it was the alternative.
Absolutely. And then also you see for the folks that don't at some point do that, they're the ones who can't retire because they have nothing else.
Yep. That's their identity.
That's their identity. So it was very easy for me to retire at 47.
Right. Yeah.
So it's, and interestingly, way easier to create this portfolio plural career than I ever thought possible as well.
P&G being in Cincinnati, was that advantageous or did it hold you guys back?
It was advantageous for a couple reasons. First of all, I didn't know anything about P&G, even though I was from Cincinnati. The only person I knew that worked for P&G was my good buddy who became my best man. His dad worked for P&G in one of the plants. So we got to go to Kings Island, with them and stuff. So what I knew about P&G was they rent out Kings Island and you can get on the Beast without waiting in line.
It's a big company.
It's a great company. And so they came to interview on UC's campus, and I had no interest in working for them, but I needed experience interviewing. So I got my suit on and went and interviewed, and they offered me a co-op job, and they said, we'll pay you this much to be a co-op. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm in. This is great.
No more Ron's Roost?
No, well, I kept working at Ron's Roost, but I double-dipped and co-opted as well.
Of course you did, Andy.
Yeah, of course. And but a couple advantages. One is my wife is also from Cincinnati, so all roads with P&G lead back to Cincinnati. So I could do the international assignment. I knew it was going to come back eventually to Cincinnati. I could do the assignment in Augusta. Eventually would come back to Cincinnati. It was, I joke, when we moved to Geneva, Switzerland, it was more acceptable with my family for me to move to Geneva, Switzerland than if I moved to the east side of Cincinnati, because they knew I was going to come back to the west side at the end. The other thing is I also had a very strong support network here family-wise. So when I had to travel, and in the end, in the last few years at P&G, I was traveling, 60, 70 days a year, because it was an international role and everything like that. I knew there was a lot of support here. And P&G did a great job, even for the folks who come in internationally. The international support is very strong as well. So that helped a lot.
Do you touch on that in the book at all?
A little bit. a little bit. The biggest thing in the book around the personal side and support side is too many people, you need to be a team. You and your spouse have got to be a team. You got to make decisions together, and the second one is most people spend more time planning their next vacation than they do planning their life.
I'm glad you said that because it popped in my mind 10 seconds before you said it.
No.
You touched on it 15 or 20 minutes ago, but you always were planning your life.
Yes, and we did it at the end of the year over usually a nice bottle of wine and say, what do we want personally? What do we want professionally? What are we looking for financially with college and different things for the kids and homes and all that? But yeah, it was incredibly intentional. And, so in 1999, we came back from Augusta. That's when we decided we were willing to go international. We didn't go till 2007, but we had planned for it. We had prepared our families for it, not just our kids and us. I mean, we all knew it was going to happen, but also, the in-laws and my family and everything like that. So, it just helped in that whole process, and so many people just don't do that.
Yeah, so what did that year-end planning, so if we don't do it, help us go there a little bit?
Yeah, no, it's it's across those three vectors. And all through the book, you'll see this over and over again of like, personally, professionally, financially, what are you looking for? Professionally is what most people spend 100% of their time trying to plan. They don't do it really well. I see too many people who they look back and they work somewhere for 10 years and they look back and they go, I don't think I've accomplished anything. But I've been here for 10 years and I've been busy, been doing things. So professionally, it looks like, what are the building blocks you need to build? So when I was in Augusta, Georgia, I said, I'm ready to be the CIO of P&G. It's just these silly people in Cincinnati don't know how good I am. And so Monster.com comes out.
The big recruiting site.
Yep. And I basically go online and say, okay, I'm going to search for CIO positions. And I got all the specs and said, damn, I don't have any of these skills. But those became building blocks. And I said, P&G is a great company. As long as P&G can offer me these building blocks, I'm in. If at any point they either say, Andy, you're not going any further, or Andy, we can't offer you those different building blocks, then I either got to change my professional career or I got to go somewhere else. So I knew exactly when they said Geneva, Switzerland, 3 building blocks knocked out. International experience, working with sales because it was mainly a sales organization, and owning an entire region as far as responsibility and people and everything like that. So that's kind of the professional. It's like, be very clear on the building blocks. And this starts right now. I literally had a conversation last night with my younger son who's thinking about what's next. And I was like, great, what are the building blocks? What do you want? What's your goal 5 to 7 years from now? What are the building blocks you got to get? You're at a great company. Can they offer those? If not, let's think about something else. So that's it. On personal, it's what you would expect. It's children, it's houses, it's that type of stuff. And financial, it's planning for those children. They're expensive, and the houses and stuff. I would say I think we also took an approach of we never live beyond our means, but we always assumed it was going to get better. So I prided myself that I drove a 1998 pickup truck to work. I was pretty sure I was the only SVP driving a pickup truck to P&G. And it was a conversation.
In the 2000s, a 98 truck in the 2000s you're driving to work.
Absolutely. Yep. 98 in 2016.
Okay.
And I now have a 98 Ford F-150 that I still drive with pride as well. Now, don't get me wrong, I still got a Tesla. Mm-hmm. And I've got some other fun race.
Just when you want to teach us a lesson, you drive the 98 Ford.
I tell people, don't ever forget where you came from.
Yeah.
And that's really important. Mm-hmm. And it also gives you great inspiration. So like the 98 Chevy was great. We were heading to Home Depot one day with my 3-year-old at the time. And I was trying to think of how do I explain innovation to P&G and to some different things and stuff like that. And we park and I said, hey, Michael, roll up the window. And he goes, he's looking for the button to roll up the window. I go, no, there's that knob right there. Just turn it. And he got this big smile on his face. He goes, you mean I can roll up the window when the car's not running? That is so cool. To him, that was innovation, because prior to that, the car had to be running to roll up the window. So just those type of inspirations are all over the place.
So how'd you say it again? It's live within your means, but always Always know it's going to get better?
Yeah, we lived within our means, but always assumed we were going to do better. So
what's that do for you mentally?
It makes you play to win. If you basically think you're where you're at and you're not confident, not naive, but not confident that it's going to get better and you're going to continue to proceed, you start playing not to lose. You got to protect what you got.
Playing defense instead of offense, maybe.
Yeah. So even in roles, it's true too. So so I just presented to John Pepper and actually Dirk Yager in different meetings at the time, different story, but I had just sold in InnovationNet to P&G. It was called TechNet at the time. We renamed it InnovationNet. They replaced me with 3 leaders, one level above me, to now execute this thing that I had come up with.
We know it now as an intranet, I'm assuming, pretty much.
Yeah, it's kind of intranet for R&D.
Yeah.
And they announced my next assignment. I was moving to Augusta, and so many people came to me and said, Andy, what are you doing? You just sold this in. You just met with John Pepper. Like, why would you not stay here and just do this? And I said, well, I trust my management that the best thing for me is to keep moving forward and getting different experiences and stuff like that. And I realized very quickly that so many people just kind of protected what they had. I always looked for what's the opportunity in front of me. Don't worry about what you're giving up.
Did you know at that time, were you conscious enough about it, that the leaders would recognize those traits as significant?
No. It's it is back to this advisory board and having some people you trust. But secondly, when you said that, it made me. So one of my nephews just graduated and just finished his CPA. Congratulations, Ben, when you listen to this. So great accomplishment. I take him out to lunch. His very first question to me is, Uncle Andy, do you ever suffer from imposter syndrome? And I start laughing because, he's going to start at Deloitte. He's doing great. And he's kind of like, is this real? And I said, Ben, every day of my life. Every day of my life. So I never took for granted or never assumed. So it's, I always tell people it's like, stay humble, but be confident. And that was kind of the mindset that I took on these things of, when you move someone to Augusta and she's 6 months pregnant, there was times I'm driving home and like, holy shit, what did I do? Was this the good move or not? And then move them to Geneva, Switzerland, and your son comes home from school and he's crying because they want him to learn French and German at the same time. And that's never going to happen, so it's, you do kind of question yourself, but no, it's just the confidence of, and also kind of this mindset of we're only here for a certain portion of time. And like, I don't ever want to look back and say, I wish I would have.
Isn't that the move? I think I'm not a guy who likes focusing or even thinking regret's a good thing. But at the same time, I'm trying to make sure I don't have any.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and that's, again, back to the gift that Debbie gave me when she was diagnosed. I'll give you a great example, of living every day to the fullest. I've got this call with this company. I don't know who they are. I don't know how I got connected to them or anything like that. But we're going to the hospital, and Debbie's going to be starting a new round of chemo. So I go, honey, let's get you situated. I'm going to go do this call. I'll be right back. I come back after 10 minutes. I got this big smile on my face. And she goes, what was it? I go, well, they want us to come to Napa, California next Friday. They're going to be hosting this, conference with board members and everything like that. And I just joined a public board, and they're going to pay for everything. All we got to do is get out there, and they're going to do wine tastings. They're going to put up this incredible resort in Napa. And by the way, on Sunday, if we want, they're going to take us to the Sonoma track because they have the Aston Martin race car team, and they're going to take us out for hot laps. And she looks at me and she goes, hold on. She calls the nurse over. She is scheduled next Friday for her second round of chemo. And she goes, is there any issue if I get that chemo next Thursday? And she goes, no, why? Is there any issue if I fly somewhere on Friday? She goes, no, if you feel fine, you can do it. She turns to me and she goes, I'm in. On that Sunday, she did hot laps on the Sonoma racetrack with the Aston Martin race car team. The first time she got in a car, they had an older gentleman drive it because they didn't want to push her. She gets out of the car, I go, how was it? She goes, that's great, but the next one I want a real driver. So she went out again with one of the young studs and full speed out on the Sonoma track, the Aston Martin race car team.
How lucky were you to have her in your life?
Incredible. So but it's that exactly what you're saying. It's that mindset of like, don't have any regrets. Don't stop living. So I coach a lot of people now, whose spouses are going through similar, and that's the most important thing is don't stop living your life.
To take it back again to these 3 tiers of you planning your life and planning your year, were they 3 separate tiers? The professional, the personal, and the financial. Was any one of them the biggest driver of what you needed to accomplish in the other tier, as I'm calling it?
Yeah, I think it depends on where you are in your journey. Certainly early on, you want to establish yourself professionally because it's going to impact those other 2 heavily. Hopefully you can make that impact professionally in a way that is congruent with your personal goals as well. So I see people make mistakes where it's like, I'm going to make my first $1 billion before I think about getting married. It's like, it don't work that way.
Come on now.
Or kids. At first I said, I don't want any kids before I'm 30. And then I start counting on my hands and toes. I go, wait a second, I want all my kids before I'm 30 because then they're out of the house, when I'm ready to retire type thing. But no, I think professionally you do that. But I'll give you a great example of how to like manage that professionally, personally. When we moved to Geneva, Switzerland, I moved a month before the family. And I spent literally 30 days, including weekends, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. every single day having a vertical startup. So when they showed up, I could spend more time with them. They got to spend a month with her family, which was great, and everything like that. So thinking about how to do these vertical startups in a way that helps you professionally, but also helps you manage call it the roller coaster of the personal, is super important.
You have fully lived your life with intention.
And it's only getting started. That's so as I said, 3 years ago, I got remarried. She was a family friend. She knew Debbie. They were friends as well. And her mom, interestingly, the connections are weird. Her mom was an executive secretary, executive assistant for John Pepper. So I joke that she had a bigger file on me than the FBI, so
and she did.
I'm sure Lori did a lot of research and background checking on me, but she also, interestingly, had got remarried in her 50s and now they're in their 80s, 30 more years, so that's the other thing is like, we're just getting started, so and now I get if you do the first career well, even semi-well, then you get to follow your passions, and your passions can become part of your second career as well. And that's where the racy car and all that stuff came in. And I learned that all from a manager at Ron's Roost, because this manager at Ron's Roost, who was in my first wedding and was at my second wedding, he had a hobby that was a passion that now is his full-time business after he's retired from Ron's Roost. And it always stuck with me of like, he turned a passion into a business. And if you can do that, you're going to be really happy.
So that's what you're doing with marriage as well. If you do the first one, even though you ideally don't want the experience that you had.
Right.
But if you live that one well, and if you do everything well, whatever's to come next, you're going to be so much more prepared.
Absolutely. And you get to pass that on to, I'm super excited to now have 4 boys because I get to coach them. I love coaching the boys in sports. Thank God Debbie encouraged me to go that direction, because it wasn't them seeing me as a coach. It was them seeing me as a coach through the eyes of their friends, because their friends are on the team as well. And when their friends are looking up to you because you're coaching well, and don't get me wrong, sorry boys, they weren't, one was a really good athlete. One was like me. I would give him hustle points in basketball. I said, every foul's a hustle point, every steal's a hustle point, every dive on the floor is a hustle point, because I knew he wasn't going to score a lot of points. But when they see you through the eyes of their friends, it's powerful. And now as I'm coaching them at this level, they're now seeing my coaching also through the eyes of the people I interact with in the industry. And they now know what that means. They know that it means something that I'm on a board, or I'm on this, or I'm doing this, or this private equity is calling me on this, and that's really powerful. So I know I can help them a lot on their journey. And the funny thing is, I don't turn anyone down. I will give anyone 30 minutes of my time.
One time.
If they buy the book, maybe I'll give them up an hour. By the way, all the proceeds of the book go to the Ovarian Cancer Alliance of Greater Cincinnati. So
awesome.
Great cause. But yeah, and even at P&G, interestingly, if I was teaching Band 1 or Band 2 college, at the end of the college, I would make an offer. I said, hey, if any of you want to set up some time and get some mentoring from me, some coaching from me, or you want to go to lunch, I'm happy to do this. This is with other P&G employees. And some other person came to me and said, Andy, you do all this training. You must be training hundreds and hundreds of people a year. How can you make that offer? Because I know less than one or two of them is ever going to take me up on that offer.
Why is that?
I don't know. And
You're an optimistic guy. I don't want to be pessimistic about anything, but that's a fact.
It is a fact.
Why is that?
And no one, in my entire career, no one's ever turned me down to have coffee or lunch or whatever. And I think they're afraid and they're scared.
But it's on them, though, too, right? You can't
Absolutely.
be the one that pulls them in.
No,
they've got to raise their hand.
Yes, and to your point, even now, like if I have a parent come to me and said, hey, would you be willing to meet with my son or my daughter and help them on their journey? I go, absolutely. Have them reach out to me. Oh, no, I can make the connection. No. Have them reach out to me.
That's the beginning.
And if they don't make the step, it doesn't happen. And if they don't make the step, they're never going to make the next step. And I'm not going to work through someone else and try to convince them. Mm-hmm. So it's an offer I can make because a lot of people won't take me up on it.
So disappointing.
Yeah.
When it's sitting right in front of them, the beginning of their entire life being the dream that they have about the life you can live, the professional experience. It's right in front of almost everyone.
Yeah. And it's
So I saw, as you're thinking about something, I saw on your LinkedIn that there's someone that I don't remember her name, but it's a review that she put on there. She said that you were the best manager she ever had.
That's good.
Why is that? You can be humble, but because you said, but why is that?
Well, I reflected a lot on like, why am I doing what I'm doing now? And I would say two things. One is I always treated people the right way. And even people I coached to leave P&G. And that's what we say for telling someone, you're not going to make it here. You need to go somewhere else. They coach and pursue other opportunities. And I would make a commitment to every single one of those people. I said, hey, unless you go to a competitor and I can't talk to you, I'm still here. Let's still have lunch, whatever. I want you to be successful wherever you go. And I took this mindset of, and it was influenced heavily right when I started working for P&G. I went to my father's retirement. And the way people came up to me and said, oh, you're Jim Walter's son, and I saw how he treated people. And I said, that's what I want to have happen at my retirement party. That people, don't reflect on what he delivered or anything like that, but that he treated people the right way. And I've kind of taken that approach.
Is that right way? Do we all know?
It's...
because Ray Dalio wrote this book, Principles.
Yeah, I've read it, yeah.
Deep. I did a leadership book study around it.
Yeah.
And, man, it's a deep dive.
Yeah. I'd say three things. One is, do you have principles, values, and purpose that people believe in? If you're, I've been very fortunate at P&G. I probably had to write off 4 or 5 people in my career who did not have principles, values, purpose that were consistent with what I thought P&G expected or what I expected, certainly. So they certainly want to believe in you as an individual. Secondly is availability. Are you available to them? I literally had leaders who prided themselves on only sending 2 emails back to their organization a day. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. The higher up you go, the harder you should be working. I still have P&G leaders today who laugh when I respond an email, and I go, what's so funny? They go, Andy, you respond faster when I send you an email even now than my current management does. I believe that the higher up you went, the more you needed to be available to your people, not become exclusive and in the ivory tower, gardened off from your people. So
servant leadership works in a huge corporation too?
Absolutely. And it works both ways too. It's availability. At some people, Andy, I don't have an organization. Oh, yes, you do. Everyone who's in a job has an organization. Your peers are part of your organization. How are you helping them? Are you coaching them? Are you available to them? Your management is part of your organization. Your external partners are part of your organization. How are you helping them be successful? I challenge people. I go, write your org chart. They go, no, I don't have anyone reporting to me. I said, write down your org chart. And it was funny because, once you get to a certain point, the only skill that matters is your ability to influence. And you're influencing not only your organization, but you're influencing your peers, and you're influencing up the organization, and you're influencing externally. You got to get better at that.
When you said that you helped coach people on how to find their other career,
right?
What made someone not be? Was who Andy was inside P&G? Was there an expectation of what? Of mastery, of a high level of performance? Was that built into that P&G experience?
Yeah. No, absolutely. P&G would. There was certainly like your functional mastery. There was your organization and talent delivery, talent management mastery, and then there was, call it your potential. Your ability to continue to move at P&G and take on bigger and bigger responsibilities, things like that. So it was unfortunately, sometimes a forced rating system on all three.
Was it more like so Jack Welch back in the day, I had a manager a long time ago that always made me rank my people. We can go here. I didn't necessarily like it as much, but it was A's, B's, C's, and D's. And if you have 4 people, all 4 of them have to be 1.
Yeah.
And their argument was you're getting rid of the D.
Yeah.
And I said, hold on. And so let's go down this path. I said, wait a minute. What if my organization of the 120 people that I'm directly impacting, what if they're better than any other group of 120? What if my D is someone else's B? What if I'm that good that my D is doing a great job?
Yeah. That's, and I think the GE system that Jack Welch was forced every year, the P&G system, I think, kind of tried to take that into consideration. And if you were rated 3, ours was 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
If you were rated 3, you were kind of warned. Next year, if you were rated 3 again, you were put on a performance improvement plan. And then third year was like, hey, you're not going to succeed here. So, in some rare cases, there might not be an opportunity to find them something else in P&G at a lower level. But most people don't want to do that.
How often did that 3 get to a 2?
A good fair amount, and that would be also kind of a realization that they're probably at their level. They're going to get in hierarchy, and they got to be okay with that too, because there'll be 2s and even 1s that will leave because they don't see the next level happening at P&G, and that's fair. So I had one individual. He was super strong performer. He was eligible to retire. He came to me, and we didn't want him to leave. And he came to me and said, hey, I had the opportunity to be the CIO at Hershey's. What do you think? I go, first of all, what I'm going to tell you next, I'm not allowed to tell you, but you should go. Absolutely. This is incredible. You get to retire from P&G and be the CIO at Hershey's? I said, what are you waiting for? Why are you even asking me? And by the way, when you get there, let's keep having lunch and let me know how I can help you on the journey and everything like that.
Are people promoted one level beyond what they're capable?
It happens. I don't think always. I think if you've got a rigorous talent management system, hopefully you can prevent a lot of that. But it does happen. It happens at P&G, and when they get to their level of incompetence, they can do a lot of damage, unfortunately. So it's one that you hopefully doesn't happen a lot, and if it happens much later in their career, such that there's an exit strategy, so to speak.
That person always moves on from the company, don't they?
Usually.
Yeah.
Usually. It's always a challenge for sure.
Yeah. Looking at the book here, waiting is not an action. Why was that? We've talked a lot, but why was that the topic? I know it's the first meeting that you had and the manager shook you up, and that was the message he sent you.
Yeah.
Right? There's no waiting. But overall, just an approach in life, like why is waiting not an action?
Yeah, and it's funny because when I first released the book, I got a lot of people wanting to argue with me, like, actually waiting is an action and it's a viable action and stuff like that. I go, so I'd always respond the same way. It was maybe a little bit mean, but I said, when your spouse is going through cancer, waiting is not an action. And I go, okay, I get it. Yeah, I think it was this whole mindset of like, keep moving forward and keep challenging yourself. I would tell people if you're not taking 1 or 2 risks a year in your job that make you incredibly uncomfortable and have the potential to make a huge impact, why are you even there?
Yeah, you're not leveling up to anything if you don't do that.
No, exactly.
Absolutely nothing.
And some of those worked out for me and some of them didn't.
Were you ever was there ever a lot of fear around that where you had to be courageous?
Absolutely. It's funny. I had even going to Geneva was funny because so before I leave, so they come to me and say, Andy, we want you to go to Geneva. You're going to be the CIO and shared service leader in Europe, Western Europe, a $20 billion business. You'll be right on the leadership team, everything like that. The last meeting I have in Cincinnati, my boss, she was fantastic, but she literally goes, hey, I need to let you know something. I go, oh, what's that? Well, a lot of the leadership of the CIO, global CIO, think you're a one-trick pony. They think you've been very successful because you've always been in, the U.S. and you've always been in roles that you seem comfortable in and everything like that. They don't think you're going to succeed there. Good luck, and we'll see you later. And I left for Geneva. And it was really interesting, but, it always kept me very grounded. And I always had kind of the funny thing is I always had this rental property on the west side of Cincinnati, a little house on Childs Avenue, that I said, you know what, if at any time if P&G came to me and said, Andy, this isn't working out and you need to move on, I'd have no problem. I'd be fine with that. Was
that the right move? Because that move that she made, it worked. Maybe she knew you and knew your personality, but that could backfire too.
It could. But it basically said there's no guarantee of success in anything you move into. You have to make that success. And, I showed up and I was even told, like, for example, Andy, they're way more transparent in Europe. So like, in the U.S., we soften the career discussion. Over there, it's very transparent. I said, okay, great, because I love transparency. Mm-hmm. And then I find out it was no more transparent than over here. And I would be the first person to tell someone, you're at level and you're not going any higher. They said, well, no one's ever told me that. I said, well, I'm the first person to tell you that then. And people appreciate that transparency. But it can be uncomfortable at times.
Did you have to learn that?
I did, and it's, and sometimes you learn it the hard way, and sometimes it works out well. And one time in Augusta, I had a meeting with one of my technicians. Again, remember, I'm 26 and my average technician age is 40. And they got a lot more life and all kinds of other experience.
And they know it.
And they know it. And the meeting didn't end the way I wanted. And I don't know if I was allowed to do this or not, but I went to his house and knocked on his door about 6 o'clock that night. He opened the door. You can imagine his face. And I said, hey, I just want to tell you that didn't end the way I wanted it to, and can we talk? And we talked on his porch, and we resolved, and he was one of my best. And
he had massive respect for you for the rest of his career.
And and another great Augusta story is I went and played softball. What I didn't know is I was going to be the only manager playing softball. There were like 30 managers and 300 plant technicians. I go and play softball because I love softball. And
you're a West Sider of
I'm
Cincinnati.
A West Sider, absolutely. And at the end, there's this plant technician who is one of the homegrown Augusta, and he's sitting on the back of his pickup truck and he goes, hey, Andy, you may be a manager, but you're okay. You can sit on the back of my pickup truck anytime. And I knew at that point I had made a connection that was going to be really important. So it was honest. I didn't do it to kind of create a fake connection or anything like that. So I think being who you are is a big part of that as well.
Also in the book, there's a acknowledgement of Apple in their 1997 marketing campaign. Yeah. Right, the only people that are truly going to change the world are the ones who dare to do it. Right. Something like that.
Yeah.
That's important to you, or else you wouldn't have it in there.
Yeah. No, that stuck with me because, again, every point in my career, there were risks that I had to take. I talked that home care, digital marketing. It was more daunting than you might think. So literally at the time, and they're famous brands, Mr. Clean, Dawn, Cascade, Febreze, Swiffer. We had 5 different interactive agencies with 5 different budgets, with 5 different plans, with 5 different brand managers, 3 different marketing directors, all driving that. I go to the general manager of home care, great leader, Colleen J., and say, I have a proposal. She goes, what's that? I go, fire all 5 agencies, pull all pots of money together, and create one thing called Homemade Simple that could be bigger, because no one wants to have a interaction with Mr. Clean. Let's create something that consumers will love. It tied perfectly to her business strategy of, we need to create the illusion that home care is much bigger than it is, to be more impactful with retailers and consumers. And she did it. So sometimes the scariest part is when they say yes, because I know I immediately have pissed off 5 brand managers, 3 marketing directors, and 5 agencies. But in the end, it was a huge success. It could have been a huge failure, but you gotta be brave enough to take those disruptive ideas forward.
That's those are brave moves.
Yes.
Right? Could you just not help yourself? Did you care so much? Did you just have to?
It was partially that, but it was kind of partially this mindset of, if I'm not doing that, why am I here?
That's the mindset a great company
and
has.
I was
from their
scared.
People. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. Every one of those steps, I was scared when I did it. Mm-hmm. My wife asked me, how are you going to go present to John Pepper? Mm-hmm. The CEO of P&G, this legendary business figure. I go, you know what? Because some people go, wow, they probably put their pants on the same way you do every morning. What I decided was I could kick John Pepper's ass in basketball. I'm 6'3", I'm a little bit taller than him. That was my mindset of there's some things he's really good at, and there's some things I'm really good at. And I'm just going to go in with the mindset of, I know this area, he doesn't. And funny, he came in with the same mindset, and the rest is history.
What are you, so you were close enough to the C-suites. You had CIO positions.
Yeah.
Right? Were those segmented to different parts of the country? Was there one CIO over?
There was a global CIO and shared service leader
Okay.
across P&G. And then there were kind of regional, and then some of the larger global business units would have them as well.
Were you plugged right in with the C-suite people?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Especially, in 2010, I came back and led the analytics transformation of P&G. So then I got to work with every C-suite leader across the floor.
What separates those people from the rest of us?
If I push another book, I'd say read the Smale book that just came out. And I think it was a couple things. One is they are willing to work really, really hard. And they will compromise other things to do that. For example, I knew very early on I didn't ever want to be the CEO of P&G, because I remember going into A.G. Lafley's office and talking with him, and he had 21 folders on his desk. Those were for the next 21 days of work. And that included Saturday and Sunday and everything like that. And I'm like, hey, thank God he's willing to do that, and he should get paid for that. That's not the life I want to live. So I think it's good to make and understand your choices and stuff like that. So the willingness to work hard is a big one. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some people that got to the level that stopped working hard, and that's a separate issue. Second is they always were innovators. So a lot of people go, Andy, are you going to write another book? I'm starting to think about another book that's around, what separated these leaders. So it's they always were an innovator in their career, even at that level. Even, when they got to that moment, they were still pushing breakthrough innovation and things like that. And they were good at execution. So they fixed problems. I told, back to moving international, I said, don't give me something that's working great. Give me something you care about. That's a big business opportunity. That's where I want to focus my time. I don't want to go be a tourist somewhere for 3 years, as a, international expat that everyone in the organization just is laughing at because they're just in a fictional position. Put me on something that you care about. And those people kind of have that mindset as well.
Innovators. Yeah, I think so. Maybe it's not because you're that type of guy. You are. So it's like, hey, I didn't want to be that 7 hour a week, 70, 80 hour, 7 day a week, 70, 80 hours, probably some 100-hour weeks. This stuff Elon Musk talks about.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think that guy can change or turn his brain off. And you hear him say often,
yeah,
hey, I don't wish this on anyone.
Yeah, no. And I would say, when I retired from P&G, I thought I still was going to go do another destination role. I was in a 60, 70-hour a week travel the world job, and I was all in. But I was very fortunate again when Debbie's situation with the cancer, that prevented me from taking another 60, 70-hour a week job. That's what created this totally different model. Maybe there's a different way to do it.
Yeah.
And people go, well, Andy, it doesn't look like you're retired. I go, well, it's hard to explain sometimes. Maybe I'm working 50% of the physical time I was working when I was at P&G, but I'm learning again.
Yeah.
I'm working on stuff I'm very passionate about, and the stress level is way lower.
So what's the next, you're an intentional planner for your life. What's the next 5 to 7 years look like in business on the professional tier for you?
Yeah, no, on the professional tier, it's one of those passions is going to turn into, I think, a really interesting business. So you alluded to this. Not only do those executives think about this all the time, they don't have any time to think about anything else.
That's it.
So what happened 6 years ago is suddenly I had brain capacity to think about something else. So a few years ago, we created a race car. So we got a Ford GT vintage race car. It's got tealpower.com on the back wing, and we use it for awareness and racing and stuff like that. And I go, well, this is kind of cool. So now we've got a separate company, L&A, Lori and Andy Touring Designs. We're doing an incredible 1969 Jaguar E-Type that we're going to make race-inspired by Doran Racing right up near Kings Island. They've built cars that have won the 24-hour Daytona, competed in Le Mans, everything like that. But we're fully electrifying the car. So it's going to have Tesla motors. And suddenly as we're doing this, originally it started as, hey, I'm going to do this for me. I think this is going to turn into a business. This is going to turn into something that people around the world are going to say, well, I'd like to commission one of those, and you build us one. So I'm super excited not only to continue to do what I'm doing with startups around the world and everything like that, and I've started to go into the investing side with these startups, but one of these passions actually becoming now an interesting business that maybe I might be able to pull one or two of the boys into as well over time.
What's the coolest track that you've driven a car on?
Now, for the races, we have professional drivers. So
That's not you?
That's not me. No, so at least not at this point. But, yeah, we've raced it at Daytona, the road course in Daytona. We're hoping to race it again in June. Now, the other kind of vector on this is private equity and VCs. There's a lot of people that like racing in those worlds, too. So one of the meetings I was hosted at was in Monaco for the Formula One race.
Well, aren't you spoiled?
So we were on a yacht on the bay right next to Ralph Lauren's yacht and stuff like that. So that wasn't too bad. That felt like a typical West Side experience.
Right. Yeah, right. Wow, the south of France and Monaco.
That course was pretty cool.
I bet.
Yeah.
So what's the fastest you've driven? You have driven one of these. You've driven the car.
Yep.
What's the fastest? Is it RPMs or miles per hour? Is that what you're tracking them?
Miles per hour.
Okay.
Now that it's only been on a smaller track. So probably, 100, 120.
You've done that in your Tesla, though.
I know. And in my old 1978 Firebird when I was in high school.
What about the 98 Ford?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if that would get there or not. So, but the car is in Daytona with the professional drivers was, pushing 200.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's
one of those hyper cars.
Yeah.
So again, back to the hyper car, hyper execution executives, that type of concept is pretty interesting to me.
I was able to drive an old NASCAR on Charlotte back in the day. I did a 3-day class. So much fun. It was only RPMs in those cars.
Okay.
Yeah. And we eventually, the third day, we were able to drive it ourselves. No other instructors in there.
Very cool.
Out on the course with other drivers. We weren't allowed to pass in the corners, but we could pass on the straightaways.
Okay.
It was fun.
Yeah, I did do the Volvo SUV
Okay.
on the Autobahn. Yeah,
See, here we go, right? You may as well move to Europe. What are you still doing around here?
Yeah.
What's your favorite place to travel in the U.S.?
In the U.S., right now I would say Napa, but it's partially personal as well. My son's in San Francisco, so it always turns into a fun trip with him. But when I moved to Geneva, Switzerland, I was a beer drinker. When I came back, I was a beer and wine drinker and brought back 400 bottles of Bordeaux. So now kind of wine is one of the things I'm really into. And when I came back, obviously got more into California wines and some of the great vineyards out there and everything like that. We do a lot of wine tastings for the charity in our basement. So we've got I created a first cellar. Now I have a second cellar as well for storage.
It's necessary.
Absolutely. Every house should have at least 2 cellars. But then we host 8 to 12 people at a time and literally raise thousands of dollars for the charity every time we do these. We do 4 or 5 a year.
What's the best wine right now for Andy's palate?
Best wine is a wine called Promontory. It just started 4 or 5 years back. It's from the Harlan family, if you've heard of Harlan Estates. It's not a cheap wine, so it's about $800 a bottle. I do pull one out at every one of the wine tastings so that everyone gets to taste it. It's the best model to do charity wine tastings because you get to drink your own wine for a great cause. So I love that. I still love a lot of the Bordeaux, especially the from Saint-Emilion area. And we actually made our own wine while we lived over there.
So yeah, that's a question too. Is Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky, is it fertile enough to make a good wine?
I don't know. Maybe with the changing environment at some point it might.
Right.
But
what's important? Why Napa? Why is it so special in winemaking? What is it about the geography of the land? What is it?
Well, I think it's very similar to the regions in France from a temperature. So it's hot and humid during the summer, which is critical, and then the soil. So it's but it's interesting. That's another great example. It's a lifestyle as well. It's a passion for those people. I love the one vineyard we visited in Saint-Emilion. It was an older gentleman who was running the vineyard, and he was previously a businessman, and this was just his love. And it was really funny because we were there with couples, and he had people on the edge of their seats on everything he was saying. And at one point he goes, "Ladies, do you know how do you become a multimillionaire in the wine business?" And they're kind of leaning forward, and he goes, "You start as a billionaire." So it's kind of like, it's just a great community of people, and that's the way racing is too. It's an incredible group of individuals, and I'm super fortunate at this stage of my life to only work with the people I want to work with and how I want to work with them. And that is probably the greatest gift anyone can get to. So I joke with people all the time when I'm coaching them and say, hey, the role is 30%. Who you're working for is 70%. You can turn any bad role into a good role. You can't turn a bad leader into a good leader.
Yeah, how often did this is a big idea about people, but how often did people really change who they were?
Fundamentally change who they were, they didn't at all. Change their leadership style and approach, absolutely. That is learned. I mean, I didn't walk into P&G knowing how to lead an organization of 1,500 people and 22 direct reports and things like that. You learn that over time, and you build your experiences. You mentioned Jack Welch. I mentioned the book Execution. I picked one thing out of Execution that I thought was brilliant that Jack Welch did. Every quarter, he would handwrite a note to his leaders and say what he thought they were doing well and what they needed to improve on. And when he did it, that was pretty normal. Now, when I wrote notes to people, it was very unusual because email was the norm. So I had leaders that when I retired, they would send me pictures. I still have the note you wrote me. So it's just those personal touches become part of your leadership style and approach. So it's, I suspect when I first started, I wasn't a good leader, a good manager, and you learn over time. And
But what were you though? If that was fundamentally, because that Andy was formed from the fundamental 22-year-old, you didn't change. But what?
I cared about people. People mattered. If you ever do any reading on military around special forces, they have this concept of people's more important than hardware, and that stuck with me. People's more important than hardware. So it's there's too many leaders that just take their people for granted. They're just kind of another piece of hardware and da-da-da. So I've always had that mindset, that approach from the beginning. Always had the higher up I went, the harder, the more I expected to get paid and the harder I expected to work. And I would be very intentional. Even if I was working on the weekend, I wouldn't send emails to my people that I would not be expecting to be working on the weekend at that time. Those type of things. So I think it's kind of having that emotional intelligence is a big element of this, for sure.
So if I asked you this question when you were 22 or 23 or 24, I don't know how you'd answer it. So let's try to see it in the context of that Andy and this Andy. Is it important to be passionate about the thing that you're doing?
I would say absolutely. And I learned this early on. The thing I couldn't understand when I first started working at P&G is like these brand managers working on Dawn dishwashing detergent. How do you get excited about working on Dawn dishwashing detergent? So I met a couple of these folks and I realized you can be passionate about anything. And if you don't get passionate about what you're doing in life, you better switch because that's not your calling or whatever.
But it's a choice, right?
It's a choice. It's a choice. So I have no patience for people who are miserable at work because it's a choice. You don't have to be there. Go get a different job if this isn't what you're all about. But be passionate about that. So it's
but you were getting ready to touch on something. Find your passion, but because I like going down this path because real estate. That's my career.
Yeah.
I wasn't passionate about it. I went all in and found my passion.
Yeah. Well, in passion, people equate, one of the mistakes I see a lot of young people doing right now is they're waiting for the perfect job.
Yeah.
There is no perfect job. What you're passionate about doesn't have to necessarily be the role. So what I realized, my model now is I work with these disruptive startups around the world. I still do bespoke strategy work for the Fortune 500. And in the third pillar that I do, I make no money on. It's just helping people on their journey. What I realized very early on at P&G that I was passionate about was helping others.
There you go.
Helping others succeed and be on their journey.
Right on. See, it wasn't about the product.
No, it wasn't about I didn't want to do programming.
Yep. If you care about people, you can find passion in no matter what your job and career is, right?
So in real estate, if you help someone successfully find the home of their dreams and start on their journey,
yep.
I got more when someone left my office and they were inspired by the coaching I gave them. What they didn't realize, they left the office excited. I was more excited than they were.
Yeah.
Because I felt like I made a difference.
Yeah, you just made an impact in their life.
Yeah.
If you could change the way they think about something, the way they're approaching their job, the way they're approaching maybe growth and leadership and education, what that's going to do, what you knew was what that was going to do for their personal life, for their personal relationships, you were going to impact their entire life. Right.
And I didn't want to give that up. So I've actually created in my new model, that's an important part of my model. Now, don't get me wrong. You help those people and they say, hey, who are these innovators you're working with over here? Can you make some connections? And I'll make some connections.
This book here. So I ended up with a hard copy, but you have some softbacks here.
Yeah, signed
right?
copies for you to give out to your podcast, whoever wants them.
Wow. Are those going to be valuable or they're signed? So I'm going to give these away. Anything I've been taught something. Truly valuable things shouldn't be free, Andy.
Yeah. Well, it's
Tell me I'm wrong, yeah.
Well, no, it's, again, it's part of my journey is helping people. So it's, what I want is if someone takes the time to read this, they get something value from it. And then what I found is I've had cases where I've given a book away for free and coached someone, and then they say, can you give me the address of the Ovarian Cancer Alliance? And they get these checks from around the world for $500 or $100 or $1,000. And they go, Andy, is this real? Can we cash this? I go, absolutely. So even though the book is like $15-$20, there's a lot of people that have paid thousands of dollars for the book because they just write a check.
What do you think? So let's say I read this over the next 14 days. You'd probably say, Mark, read it in 3.
Yeah.
Let's just say I read it over 14 days and it becomes a nightstand mode. My significant other, she critiques me at times that I want to start another book before I finish the current one. It's not the great habit, but I do finish them. What do you think my takeaway is?
I think 3 things. First, personal, professional, financial. Have a plan. Get a plan. I have an appendix on how to build a plan and do that whole thing. Second is you got to have a vertical startup in everything you do. Everyone's going to decide in the first 90, 100 days whether you're going to be successful, whether it's a new project, a new role, a new company, or whatever. It's way harder to recover from that than to have a vertical startup from the beginning and be successful. And then the last is it's a blueprint. Whether you're just starting your career, whether you're mid-career and still want to be in the C-suite, or whether you're at the end of your career and want to come to my dark side, doing board and advisory work at some point, at the end of each chapter is this is what you need to do now. So what I wanted to be was really functional, that, these are the steps you can take right now. Now, unfortunately, like one of them is, the first chapter is on, you got to build your network. And you got to be intentional about building your network. When I, in the last 2 years at P&G, I was intentional about formalizing my network because I knew potentially I was going to be leaving. And I went from 400 connections on LinkedIn to 2,000 connections on LinkedIn. Just reconnecting with people that I'd worked with and everything like that. I'm now at over 15,000 connections on LinkedIn. But be very intentional around
over
that.
16,000, just for the record.
Exactly. Yeah. But and then the your personal brand. And this is one that I talk a lot with people. They go, Andy, if I do really good work, I don't really have to worry about branding myself. I said, that's bullshit. I said, Tide is the best detergent in the world, bar none. Every test you run, it's the best detergent in the world. Tide Pods are phenomenal. How much does P&G spend advertising Tide? $200 million a year. $200 million a year to convince you Tide's the best product, even though it is the best product. So you're telling me if I do great work, I don't have to do branding? It doesn't work that way. So the whole second chapter is build your personal brand, not just within your company, but beyond your company. And be intentional, just like we're intentional with Tide. What are my differentiators? What are the things I'm trying to do? And those become part of your building blocks. So I hope when people read this, they say, I need to be starting to do this stuff. And it's never too late to start. And I wrote the book for someone who's just starting their career, again, mid-career or towards the end of their first career is the best way to put it.
Because that's what's awesome is you're starting again.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And if you're starting again with everything you've learned, it's possible.
Absolutely. And I hope I've got another 30, 40 to keep doing it. I've got a fellow investor in some of the startups I work who started Sun King Brewery in Indianapolis, Omar Robinson. He is 84 and still doing it. I'm like, Omar, you're my hero. He goes, why? I go, because you're telling me I can do it for another 30 years potentially. This is going to be great.
So do you use that term hero lightly?
No, it's I love the other one I use a lot, and now there's a commercial on it. It's like calling someone a rock star. Huh? I love calling someone a rock star.
Why?
But only if they really are a rock star.
What's that mean?
A rock star is someone who truly has made a difference. They've got a brand equity. They've got a following. And the best indicator of a good leader is not how many people report to them, but what's their following. People don't follow you because they report to you. They follow you because they believe in you. They believe in what you're doing, and they believe you have their best interest in mind. You nail those three, and they will run through the wall with you. So rock stars are known. They have a following, and they're really good at doing something. And I think that applies absolutely in the business world and those type of things as well.
So kudos to you for backing up what. So I think what I see in front of me today, I think it's the guy you are. I think that's to be commended and valuable. The reason why I know that, and I knew coming into the conversation today, was in the preface of the book, there are a ton of people. This is how I know you're accurate and true and honest about you building your network. There's people in there that I don't know their names, but you look at the organization they were with and the title that they had, I knew coming in today, like those were intentional relationships you formed.
Yeah.
Whatever you did, if you saw the book coming and I need these people to say something good about me, but those people in those positions don't just write a statement about you or about a book without you really digging into that network, making an impact, creating relationships. So you probably have an entire army of people that if you needed something,
and they know they have an army on this side if they need something, so and that's the other thing, is, one of my CEOs asked me, Andy, what are you going to do with 15,000 plus people on LinkedIn? I said, it's quite simple. My goal is to help every one of them.
Make an impact, baby.
Make an impact. Help every one of them. And he goes, every single one? I go, well, yeah, why not? And my wife, Lori, just laughs at me. She goes like, do you know all 15,000 of these people or 16,000 of these people? I go, yeah, at some level. Yep. Some I know really well. Some I kind of know, and Some we just connected because we have something in common, and I'm willing to help any of them. And that's a differentiator, and you got to believe in that, and you got to practice that. There's my tax guy tell a funny story in the book. He said, when I retired from P&G, he said, Andy, what are you going to do now? I said, well, for lack of a better term, for him, I said, I'm going into consulting. And he kind of rolled his eyes and he goes, yeah, every P&G executive I've ever talked to after they left P&G said they're going to do consulting. And 99.9% of them are not successful. And I said, oh, okay, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. You're like a manager when I was going to Geneva. Thanks.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody thinks you haven't earned this.
And the differentiator continued to be how I've treated people my entire career. That hasn't changed. And my willingness to work hard for them and for my clients and for the people in my network, and not everyone's willing to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, it ain't going to happen.
How are you going to mix this in with being an awesome grandpa in the future?
I don't know. Well, my first son is getting married in September.
Okay.
Although we'll see,
what happens.
They got different ideas on when would they have kids and if they will have kids and all that. That's great. That's just the next generation. It's how
good of a grandpa are you going to be?
I think I'm going to be a pretty damn good grandpa. Although, Lori laughs. She goes, yeah, we haven't decided what they would call her, but she's convinced they're going to call me Mr. Walter. So I don't know what that exactly means, but she brought 2 dogs to the relationship. Unfortunately, one of them has passed away, and the other one she's convinced just knows me as Mr. Walter. So, but it's going to be fun. That's what I realize is every stage is fun and more fun than the last. When they were young, it was fun. When they were 9 and 11, we were in Geneva, it's fun. When they got into high school, it's fun. College is a blast. Now they're young adults. We try to do everything we can. They're all off the official payroll. Mm-hmm. Now they're on just the fun payroll. Like, hey, we're going to go here for 2 weeks. If you guys can make it, we'll fly you in. Great. If you can't, we understand.
Do they still listen to Dad?
I think so. It's it's like I said, it goes back to that coaching in sports. Seeing me through the eyes of others creates a new level of respect and listening. And that was a great insight for me, and it's true kind of in your organization too. The greatest testament to a leader is what are the stories they're telling about you when you're not in the room. What's the organization saying about you when you're not there? What are they talking with each other? Because that's influencing each other more than anything you tell them.
That's the truth.
Absolutely.
That's the truth.
So I think they do. I think Lori's boys probably listen a little bit more because they haven't known me as long, and maybe there's still a little scariness to me and stuff like that. And it's like, who is this guy? And he's done a lot of different things and all that. But it's all fun.
We're 2023. It's wild. Every time these years just keep on clipping off, don't they? You're excited about the future.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
You're excited maybe about the possibilities for the things we don't know.
Yeah.
All right? Thanks for coming in today.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure. And I like that this focus on the necessary entrepreneur. It's every single person, no matter what role they're in, needs to be thinking like an entrepreneur. That's critical.
What's necessary in your life that you need to do to live the life you want?
It's not much.
Yeah.
That's the other, epiphany I had of, once you get to a certain point, it's much better than thinking about what else, how much more can I make or anything like that, but almost reverse engineer it is how much do I need to keep making just to keep living the life that I want to live and make a difference for these different things. We still do a lot of work with charities. I'm still on the board for the Ovarian Cancer Alliance of Greater Cincinnati, and spending time on that stuff matters. So it's we've realized if you want to make a difference, you can make a difference.
All right, so you've made life. I'll try to make this my last statement connection. You've made life even through all the struggles and Debbie and your wife passing away, and you've made life seem pretty awesome.
Yeah. No.
Okay. We know what you went through with her with ovarian cancer.
Right.
Was there a moment professionally where your back's up against the wall, and maybe these are some of those moments you don't share, where you had to do whatever it took, no matter what? Did you have that pivotal moment?
Yeah, and you find out you can do it. So you alluded to Elon Musk. My moment early in my career was we were trying to start up Tide dry cleaners in Atlanta. And it was probably the only time I worked 110 hours in 1 week. And nothing was going right. We were literally developing the software on the fly while we're trying to start this thing up. We're supposed to start on Monday. And you just do what it takes. We slept in the building, and just kept going. And then what happens is your capacity has just been expanded, and you're never going to go back to what it was before. And I think Geneva, Switzerland was another one where it's like you just expanded yourself. That's never going to retract again. And your willingness and openness to try new things and take on new challenges is going to be great.
Where did Andy find the courage?
I think through family and through, I've been incredibly fortunate to have two incredible women in my life, Debbie and Lori. And I don't take that for granted. And that's super, super important, this partnership with the spouse and things like that and the family and all that. I think that happened. And then I think, those mentors and advisors encouraging you along the way. So it's all the way back to my first job at Ron's Roost. Within 2 weeks, that individual I was alluding to before, moved me up to be a cook after 2 weeks because he saw something and liked what he saw and took a challenge.
My takeaway from this is, it's easy to say be a good person, but man, if you're in a leadership role, you got to care about your people. Yep. and care about them and go all in and find these little ways to. You don't have to make these huge impacts, but man, just go in there and see if you can make a little impact. Have a moment in their life to say, hey, if I go a little further with them, if I go a little bit deeper, like can I change maybe the way they're thinking? Can I change their outcome? Can I change their next opportunity? And if we go in there and we'll just take some time to care. If we'll take some time to say, hey, you know what, this is my responsibility to be here for them. Yeah. To show up and spend extra hours for them, to go the extra mile, to pick up the slack and maybe show them there's a better way and show them a way to be a little more courageous because maybe they don't have those people in their life.
Yeah, no, and if you were on the other side of that, what else are you willing to take on?
Right on.
Because they will start identifying you as someone they want to invest in as well. And I think that's a part of it as well. It's, I don't want anyone who's listening to say, okay, then I'm just going to wait here until someone else comes and starts doing this for me. You need to take action to force it. Start, becoming part of the organization. Start helping with events. Start doing all these things that are not in your job description that suddenly people are going to look and like, who is this person? And I want to keep my eye on them. You talked about one of the quotes, and before she wrote the quote, she's now a senior leader at Siemens. I didn't even know about it until she sent me the quote. And she basically was sitting in this meeting where I was presenting early in my career, and one of the senior leaders leaned over to her and said, you better watch this guy. He's going to become something. I didn't know that until she sent me that. And she's still one of my advisors today.
And hence, you were working on your brand and didn't even know it.
Absolutely. So what I try to do is go back in time and say, what were the things I didn't even know I was doing at the time? That's what's in the book.
That's awesome.
So it's a blueprint.
That's awesome. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Go buy the book. It's on Amazon. Is it on Audible?
It is.
Really?
It is.
You or someone else?
Someone else, because I decided it better to have a professional voice than mine. Although some people are disappointed they didn't get to hear my voice.
I think the next book needs to be yours.
All right, good.
All right. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for the time.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Yes.